good there. Okay. So I just want to remind you that all of your assignments will be on Canvas, all right? And you will submit everything to Canvas to be graded. If you go to assignments, of course, right, your assignment for, and I usually give about a week. Sometimes if it's a large assignment, you'll get 2 weeks to finish something. But I will publish it here. You will, turn in your assignments here. But here is an example of your assignment for this week, right? Coordinate drawings, which is what we're going to cover today. Sometimes it's all text. Sometimes I have a linked PDF, right? So if I click on the PDF, of course, here are all the instructions on how to accomplish this assignment, okay? These PDF files that are located within the assignment, though, those are part of the book. And just a little reminder, the course manual, the book, right, is located here for you to download. So if you click on course manual there, right, of course, here's a PDF version of that. Okay, so everything that we're going to talk about, all of the assignments, even if they're in Canvas, they will also be in this PDF course manual. All right. Does anybody have any questions about navigating Canvas at all? Okay. Probably you're all pros at it by now. Okay, well, let's get into AutoCAD. And we're going to talk about a coordinate system today, right? Let's see, hold on 1 second. So if we, so starting in my book, and let me just say this, I think your book might be a page or two off my book because mine's a little bit older than yours, but I didn't want to reprint it. But my coordinate entry starts on page 1-30, okay? So if you want to follow along, which it's fine if you don't, right? If you don't have the book, it's okay. But if you do want to follow along, that's where we're at, okay? All right. Yep.
Is it the same AutoCAD program?
Uh-huh.
I'm not showing it on my desktop.
Oh, it's not on your desktop? Let me go tell David. Somebody move it. Let me go real quick. If you guys run into any problems like that, just let me know so we can get it fixed. Right over here. Did you guys find it? I didn't see it in the menu even. I don't think, I mean maybe, but I don't think that's the best route. We should just get it solved. Yeah. So he's got an issue. Well, you're going to be an observer for a minute there. Okay. All right, so today we're going to talk about coordinate entry. We're going to talk about the coordinate entry system in AutoCAD, okay? And we're going to be using a few class files. So I'm going to lecture some, and then I'm going to have you try some things out, right? And if there are any problems, then, we'll work through those. What we're going to be doing today is going to be exactly like your homework, all right? So just know that. The class files that we'll be working on, they're going to be located in CAD Common, right? And I just want to remind you, if you can't find CAD Common, I'm going to come down here to my little window. I'm going to start typing FI like I'm going to type file. and I'm going to open up a File Explorer, just a regular old file. And I'm going to go to this PC, and then I'm going to go to CAD Common here. Okay, click, click, and I'm going to go to Arch, 1310. Oh, not NIMAS, just 1310. And in here, under, we have the coordinates one, there's this one, of course, but under drawings is where, so for whatever reason, coordinates has been taken out, but here is where all of our other in-class drawings are going to be located.
Sorry, can you repeat that more time? Mine just took a while to load.
Yep, no, that's good. If you go to this PC, okay, and then you go to CAD Common.
It's fine.
It's fine, you found it?
Yeah.
Where was it?
Under AutoCAD.
So it hadn't been even,
Maybe the icon is not there, but the program was still installed in the computer.
that's weird.
I wonder if it's installed on the program or control panel, but not desktop.
I don't know. Okay, now we go to Arch, and then 1310, and this is where all of our files are going to be. We don't need that one there. Okay. So coordinates is the file folder we're going to be using today, but otherwise under drawings, that's where all of the other in-class files are going to be. So I'm just going to right-click on this, and I'm going to choose copy. You're more than welcome to make an entire copy of that whole folder and take it home with you, right? So that if you want to do homework at home, right, you can do that, of course. Everybody plugs in their zip drives now, right? I'm going to paste a copy of it onto my desktop just so that I have it there to work with. And I'm going to call this AutoCAD Spring 2018. And I'm going to paste that file folder in here. Okay. Hello, Kevin. How's it going? All right. Yeah, he's using his laptop. We're a little full.
She's so popular.
No. No, it's...
Oh, look, we even got plumbing on the floor. This doesn't work over here.
Oh, is there another one back there?
Desk here.
She was just kind of hanging. She wanted to use her laptop, so we're just kind of hanging out.
Since I'm not in the class yet, it's not showing the class drive on my computer.
Well, your T drive is maybe not showing. It's not necessarily a class drive. I don't think it should be specific.
Home default and data drive.
Okay,
So, Burke is putting it on my
he is. Okay.
class drive. So,
Well, let's ask. We'll tell David that your T drive is still not working.
okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
The one that we're using today is called coordinates. No.
Well, thank you.
It is a common problem.
Anything else okay?
Yeah. So far. So far, so good.
You don't want a desk?
She was
I mean,
waiting.
Do I need to clear the monitors off so you can sit at the table? I mean, I understand some people do well on the floor, but you know, it kind of makes you feel like we're professional here.
I tried.
Stubborn students.
It's okay.
Right?
She's good. Okay. So, sorry. This PC, and then you go to CAD Common. Okay, Arch and 1310. That's where they're going to be located. And this is where we'll go for all of our files. So, you may not remember the first time, but you're going to get very used to navigating to here. Okay. All right. So I just copied those files, and we'll be using those today. And let's open up one of the first files. We'll take a look at it, and then we'll start talking. Okay. So I double-clicked and I opened up the CAD icon, right? And this is what comes up, our splash page. Of course, we talked about this last time. I'll be kind of going back and forth between some of the things we talked about on our, kind of first lecture to remind you of, where things are and how to navigate, for the first maybe this class and next class, right? But I think after that, everybody's familiar. Yes. Oh, you are, well, maybe. Is that you? Okay. Is that you? The wires are switched. Back. Was that you? Yeah. Okay. Let me know when you want me to reconnect. Okay.
How do I change my color screen when I go into drawing? I think
yours. Okay. Okay, so the problem he's having over here is that when he opened up kind of a, well, wait a second, never mind. I don't think that, hold on, let me try something. The problem is, okay, so the problem he's having is that when he opened his AutoCAD, so if you open up just a blank AutoCAD file like this, his screen is gray. And it's kind of hard to see his cursor on a gray background, right? And so I'm going to show you how to change the background from, well, really just to change the background to any color you want, right? A lot of people who use Revit, they like to change it to white so that it looks the same from Revit to AutoCAD. But I would say the most typical background color is going to be a black background, okay? So the way that we're going to change this background from gray or black or white to a different color is we're going to type in options. And if you just start typing options, either the text will pop up at your command line or it will pop up at your cursor if you have dynamic input on. Regardless of where it pops up, just hit enter. And this options dialog box pops up here. Okay. If you go to display, it's the second tab over here. All right. Or sorry. Yes. No. Okay, yes, it's changed a tiny bit. If you go to display right here, right, I have the color scheme set to dark. And then the second thing, if that doesn't kind of fix it, what you're going to do is come down here to colors, click on that, and it will say you have a bunch of different kind of areas in AutoCAD, right? You have paper space, you have model space, and if your 2D model space right here is set to a different color over here, this is where you would change that setting. So is yours turned to gray, right? So if I change it to green, right, mine will look like that. If I change it to white, it will look like that, right? But I think the most accepted background for AutoCAD is black. I hit apply, I hit OK, and then my background is changed. Yeah. It used to be in AutoCAD that when you would download it, the background was white, and so we would learn that immediately, and then they kind of got smart to the idea that nobody really liked the white background in AutoCAD, and so they changed it so that out of the box it's black. All right, so let's talk about AutoCAD. Let's talk about the coordinate system that AutoCAD uses to organize itself, and then how we're going to function in that system, okay? Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on coordinate entry, right? And Jeff, who kind of, he developed this course, he would spend a lot more time on it, but I think that, I mean, honestly, people catch on to it pretty quickly, but number two, I think, you know, we just really need to know what the organizational system is, and, you know, you don't use it a whole lot after you learn what it is. I'll just be honest, right? So the kind of the way I look at this course is, you know, I've used AutoCAD for a long time, professionally probably for, well, a really long time. We won't talk about years, right? But I really like to emphasize the things that I used when I was professionally working in AutoCAD, right? So things that I feel like are really important I emphasize, and things that I feel like, hey, you need a general knowledge of, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on. We're just going to kind of move pretty quickly over it, okay? The coordinate system entry, I think it's good to have a general knowledge, but we won't spend a ton of time on it, okay? All right, so let's look at this system, all right? There's a couple things I want you to recognize, right? One of the first things is that we have a little marker down here at the, you know, in the bottom left-hand corner of our screen, right? Of course, this is my cursor that's moving around, right? And I'm just moving it using my mouse, right? I want to remind you that to zoom in with my cursor, right, if I want to move closer to an object, I can put my finger on the little roller button in the middle of my mouse and push it forward, and I zoom in, and I can pull it back towards me and zoom out, okay? So I can zoom in, I can zoom out. I can also pan, which means to, you know, move about the screen. So if I hold my middle roller down and I move my mouse, I'm panning, all right? So rolling, zooming in, zooming out, panning back and forth. Okay. So we have a little icon here. This little icon right here is called the UCS icon, the User Coordinate System icon. and it's placed at 0.000 in model space, okay? AutoCAD is organized around, and this is something you've heard in algebra, right, the system, the Cartesian coordinate system, right? So it's a gridded system, essentially. And if you notice, and I think this is now, let me look at somebody's screen. Oh, you guys don't have it on just yet. Well, I'll show you how to turn it on, but just look at my screen. Do you see how when I move my cursor that these little numbers right here change, right? So as I move my cursor, those numbers change, and essentially what they're doing is they are telling me in model space where my cursor is located, okay, according to the Cartesian coordinate system. Oh my gosh, look at this. If any of you are doing the AAS, right, in the architecture program, this is going to be your future. I don't even know what that means. Right? Jeff does, though. Jeff Plant's one of our other instructors. He teaches you how to customize AutoCAD, which is quite involved. All right. So the Cartesian coordinate system, right? It's a system that is based off an origin where we have kind of that central point, right, which is 0, 0. And we'll give it a third dimension, 0, 0, 0. And it's based on ordered pairs of numbers, x, y, and z, right? This might sound familiar. This gridded system, right? Positive, positive, negative, negative, right? So if I have a point in space that is located like right there, I have something right there, right? It is located, this is the x direction, this is the y direction, and the z direction, which I see here, it's a third dimension. We're not going to really talk about just yet. But we could say there's a third axis there. Yep.
I believe it's the other way. The y is at the top and the x.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. I knew that. You're right.
Sideways world.
There we go. The sideways world. Still works, right? You're right. Like, so if we were to look at this and say, right, this is 1, 2, 3, 4 in the x direction, right, or y direction. I'm all confused today, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So that would mean that in this ordered system where this is 0, which is the origin, right, then this point is located at, 8, 4. And it's just really kind of as simple as that, right? And if this were a line and the line went over to here, we could extend this system out, right? We could say 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So this one would be 16, 4, right? So in AutoCAD, we can locate things using this system. Very rarely do we speak to people and say, well, I drew a line and it started at 8, 4 and went to 16, 7. We just don't, it's not that easy, right? There's other methods of inputting and talking about geometry, but I think it helps to know how the system is just in general organized, right? So if you have a problem or someone who wants you to input something a specific way, then you know how to do that, okay? But really, this is how the system functions. And we have a positive direction and we have a negative direction as well. So, all 4 quadrants can very nicely locate things in the positive and negative, wherever it is in the system, I guess I should say. Okay. So this little user icon, the UCS, user coordinate system icon, that locates point 0, 0, 0 in that system. So that is the very middle of our model space. Okay. Now we need to know what it is. We need to be able to recognize it when we see it. But really when you get into drafting, you're not going to really pay attention a whole lot to it, right? This is very helpful when you're working in 3 dimensions. It's very helpful if you have a problem to locate something, but it's not something you keep in your mind all day when you're working, all right? All right. Something else you're going to notice, right? We have an implied grid behind us here in our model space. When I zoom in, it gets slightly larger. When I zoom out, it gets kind of smaller and then regenerates, right? Okay. You can have that grid turned on. It's much more of a visual grid than anything because I can't really measure from it. I can't snap to it, meaning I can't place lines exactly on it, but it gives me a visual sense of what is going on, all right? This grid that is being shown here, let me just show you you guys aren't going to need to worry about this just yet, but this grid right now this is a 0.5 increment. So really, if you were to compare it to feet and inches, it would be at a 1/2 inch increment. Okay, so this grid, every 2 of those little squares is equal to 1 inch in AutoCAD. You can't see it very well up there on the screen that's being projected, but it is there.
Is that how it's always gonna be?
No, you can change it. Yeah, you can change it. I don't find the grid very helpful because usually when I'm inputting something, I have a specific increment in mind, like 10 feet, right? So I'm not going to come in here and be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, I'm not going to count those grids and use it, right? So it's good for reference and scale maybe, but you know, if you don't like it, then you can turn it off and it doesn't really matter, right? I feel like it's distracting. All the visual, I don't know, I don't like it very much. Anyway, so we can turn it off if we want to, and we'll talk about how to do that in a minute, right? But for now, we have our UCS icon, we have our grid in the background, okay? I want to remind you we have our quick access toolbar at the top, and we have our file menus here, of course. If your file menus are missing, which frequently they are when you install AutoCAD for the first time, you're going to use this little drop down right here, at the top of your screen, click, and you're going to choose Show Menu Bar. Right, so if you go home and you're working and that's missing, you're going to choose Show Menu Bar. All right, this is our ribbon, of course. The ribbon contains all of our icons for tools, for drawing tools, modification tools, all that good stuff. Okay. Any other questions on any of this stuff before we get moving on actual coordinates? Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's open up one of the files that for the coordinate system exercise. I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to go to my coordinate folder, and I think I'm going to choose, let's choose absolute coordinates first. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to hit Open, and that's going to open up this exercise. We're going to see it on the screen. All right. Couple things before we actually get going on this. I want to talk about some graphic things on the screen. Okay. The first thing is this command line right here, right? At the bottom of our screen, we have a command line. Yep.
I'm gonna quickly log out and try logging in because my AutoCAD is acting weird.
Is it?
Yeah.
What's it doing?
It just won't like upload when I click.
Okay, you gonna reboot then?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Before you do that, let me, 1, 2, is that you? Did I just unlink you? Okay, that was you. All right. Sorry, the wires are very literally crossed all over the place. So, was that you?
That was me.
Okay,
That's me.
that's you. Okay.
How do you get to that screen?
The wires are crossed. It's just every semester we're like, we need to really uncross those wires. Yep.
If we open up the absolute coordinates thing.
How do you?
Yeah, how did you open that?
Do you mean where is it?
Yeah.
Or
Where? Yeah.
okay. So that is going to be in the CAD Common file again. So if you go to this PC, right, and you go to CAD Common, Arch, 1310, it's going to be that folder right there. So you can open it directly from CAD Common. You shouldn't be there. They should be read-only, right? Which, if it says that this is a read-only file, just hit OK.
Okay.
Yep. But if you copy it onto your desktop, you can also open them from there.
And what's it called again?
It's called Absolute Chord.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right, so we've opened our file. If these are not showing, right, you know how to turn them back on. We know where all of our tools are. This command line down here at the very bottom, right, you're noticing that mine is kind of floating a little bit just above this taskbar line down here. You can leave it there if you'd like. You'll see me, and I'm just talking about visual differences and things because I think that's a really hard thing to kind of navigate if things look different, right, from one computer to the next. But if I click on this little tab right here and hold my mouse, I can drag my command line down to the bottom and dock it, right? What I like about that, we'll talk about drafting preferences. I don't like that when I type like this, well, it's not even giving me that I get a giant, so this is all picky, right? I don't like a giant menu popping up over the top of my drawings, right? And so I tend to not like that there. I like to dock it at the bottom so that when I start typing something, if a menu's going to pop up, it's over to the side somewhat, right? It tends to not cover my geometry, right? So it's personal preference. You can do whatever you want, but these are just things you'll see me doing, okay? I also don't like what's called dynamic input, right? Which means that when I'm going to do something or I start typing in something like L-I-N-E, it happens at my cursor. Again, you know, I don't like it when my screen gets covered by something, you know, and so when I'm drawing stuff, I don't like it when all of this stuff covers things because I'm trying to view my lines on the screen as I'm drawing. And when things are blocked, I sometimes have to escape out of a command, zoom in so that something's not obscuring something else, and then start again, right? Again, right? Well, you'll all turn into CAD nerds eventually. But it's personal preference, whatever you want to do. But I don't like things obscuring other things on my screen, and I feel like this is a lot. So I like to turn that off. And let's talk about turning that off before we start looking at this assignment, okay? Down here we have our Object Snap toolbar, all right? And Object Snaps help you draw things. And there's a lot of different ways to help you draw things, okay? Is it good? No? No? Okay, let me get...
Oh, ooh, that was bad.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really funny.
David's always very nice to come help. Am I right?
Yeah.
She's missing operating system.
Just that.
Just that? It feels kind of serious to me, right?
I put it out before I logged out.
Oh, she rebooted. Okay. So this little taskbar down here, this will allow you to turn settings on and off, right? And they're mainly drafting settings, drawing and drawing aids, right? We'll get in more definition of those things in a bit. Let's talk about first, I guess, before we get going, let's talk about how to turn some of these options on and off, okay? So do you see this these three little lines down here in the very bottom right-hand corner? If you click on that, it's called customization. And when I do that, a sort of menu of all of the different object snaps that are available to us or drawing aids pops up, okay? The ones that have checks are available for me to view down here, you know, kind of real time. The ones that don't have checks are not shown. So these are all of the different drawing aids that I always have turned on or available to me to turn on and off. We're good? Good. Good. Okay. So you may want to just kind of note these. These are the ones I'll have turned on and off. Everybody always takes a photo. But it will be on, I'm recording, so it'll be on the video as well. But I always have these ones turned on and off. So if you want your screen to be just like mine, these are the ones you'll want to have turned on and off. There are two specifically that you need to have turned on for today, so just check. The first one is going to be called units. So if you don't have units with a check mark next to it, you need to check mark it on. And if you don't have dynamic input check-marked, you're going to want to turn that one on as well. Okay. I'll just give you guys a second to do that. Good? Okay. Don't worry, I'll speed up as our lectures get going. We'll go slow for the first couple weeks and then we'll really start to gain some speed. Okay. So what that did was down here, there's a little icon. It's called dynamic input mode, and it looks like a little ruler with a little plus sign next to it. In actuality, it's a cursor with a little input next to it, right? If that is blue, and this is the case for any of these, right? If that is blue, then it's turned on. And that means that when I go to draw things, measure things, do anything, all of this distracting visual, we'll call it collage, right? Turns on your screen. Okay, so if you don't like that, click and turn it gray, which turns it off. And you'll see that now I have a nice clean screen with nothing obscuring any other drawing on my page. Okay? All right, so that's one thing that we're going to worry about just for now. Okay, we'll worry about the units in a second. Yep.
Where do I go? Is that
what was that again?
Where
Sorry.
do I go?
Let's see. Where are you at? Okay. Oh, you're gonna want to open the coordinates file. So go to Try Common. Yep, there you go. Click. Yep, you're gonna type FI. You're gonna go to a file.
Oh, well, I am already there.
Oh, you were
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Okay, so Arch 1310. There you go. It's that very first one. There you go. And we're gonna open Absolute. Click. There you go. And okay. And hit OK again. Yep. There you go. All right. Now, you may start playing around with these things and you're going to notice that, hey, there's one that's called grid, right? And if I click on grid, look, my grid goes away, right? So that's a visual setting. You can change that, turn it on or off if you don't like it. We have our ortho and our polar and all these other things that we're going to worry about in a little bit, okay? All right. So let's talk about the ordering system. And how to input geometry using this ordering system, all right? Now again, I'm going to show you this system. We're going to draw a few things using this system, and then likely you won't use this. You'll use it rarely, right? It's very rare that I input things like this, but I'm very happy to know how to do it when I am asked to do it, right? Okay, so there are a few different ways that AutoCAD draws things or allows you to draw things. One of the first ways is called by absolute coordinates. Okay, absolute coordinates means that when I draw something, I'm drawing it and AutoCAD is measuring from the origin, right? So if I want to draw this point, I go from the origin over 8 units and up 4 units, okay? Which is different than the second system we'll talk about, okay? So if I wanted to, for example, draw a line, and I wanted to draw a line using absolute coordinates, I would initiate the command line, and there's a couple of different ways I can do it. I can click on line, click. By doing that, the line command was initiated. I'm going to hit escape, escape, escape. I can also type L-I-N-E, line. And when I do that, the text occurs, the input occurs at my cursor or at my command line, and I can hit enter, enter. And my line command is initiated by doing that. Escape, escape. I could also come up to my draw menu here, click, and go down to line, right? Again, I'm going to show you these things several times in the beginning and not again, but however you want to initiate a command is up to you. I could do any one of those 3 things and all of them would be correct. It's just personal preference. Okay? Yep.
How do you see like the line that has like the tabs like file, edit, and view?
Oh, let me show you one more time. Yep.
I thought you're a student looking for Naima.
She should be here within the next hour or so. What's your name?
Sarah?
Sarah, let me get your, do you mind me texting her your phone number?
I have her phone number.
You do?
Yeah.
Did you text her?
No.
You can text her.
I have.
She's okay with it.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very free about giving out personal phone numbers, right? Okay. So the first thing you want to know about drawing using absolute coordinates is that, you know, however you initiate your drawing command is fine. And I'm sorry, you asked me a question, and it's out of my head now. What was the question again?
Oh,
You
I
got it? Okay. Okay, good. Sorry. All right. All right, so let's draw some lines. In fact, let's draw this exact shape using absolute coordinates, all right? So the way I'm going to go about this is that I want to initiate the line command, and then I'm going to define where the line command starts and stops using the coordinate system, okay? So I'm going to initiate the line command, click. I know that my command has been initiated because if I look down here at the command line, it says specify first point, all right? The way that we're going to specify the first point using absolute coordinates is by inputting a paired, a paired number system, an XY paired system, okay? So I want to start at 1, 1, and my line command is initiated. So I'm going to type at the command line 1, 1, enter. Okay. We're going to do this first one together. So So you guys get the idea, right? This one is 1, 1. Now, what you may not have recognized as you were kind of moving through the exercise is that the line command is what we call a chain command. So as I continue to enter ordered pairs, it continues to create lines, right? So I can create, continue to enter ordered pairs, and it will just create line, 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 right? Which is the same command as click, 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 click when I input a line command. It continues that line command on. So I've defined my first point. Now down here at the command line, we're forming some habits here, right? We're initiating a command, and then when you're, the next command that operation requires, you need to find out what that is. In the case of a line, you initiate the command, and then it's going to say, specify your first point. Well, how do you know if you need to specify a first point? Well, you look down here at the command line, right? So you initiate a command, you immediately look at the command line, and the command line will give you instruction on what you need to do next, right? That's going to be the series of events that we move through as we create geometry, right? Initiate, look at the command line, execute the command, okay? How many of you know Revit in here? A little bit. Okay, Revit doesn't have a command line really, right? It has a tiny little like informational thing at the bottom, but it doesn't have a command line. So you're gonna have to get used to looking at the command line to see what you have to do next, okay? All right, so specify next point. Well, our next point is at 4, 1. Okay, 4, 1, enter. Okay, this next point right here, I'm looking for my ordered pairs right here, of course, but I can also look at this little kind of graph that has been built into this exercise, right? And I could say 0, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, up 1, and that would be 4, 1, right? The next ordered pair is 4, 2, enter. The next one is 8, 2, right? You guys get the idea. 8, 4, we've got 1, 4, 1, 1, enter. Now I'm finished, I can hit escape. Okay. This is a fun little game for like maybe 1 or 2 exercises, right? Yep.
Mine just isn't working. I did the first point, and then if I go
Okay.
one, it puts it back.
Right. Let me show you the problem with that. Sorry. Okay. So here's is it Brian? Is that right? Are you Brian?
I'm Brian.
You're Brian. What's your name? Sam. Okay. Well, I was in the right quadrant over here. So what is happening with Sam is that he still has his dynamic input on, and his dynamic input is interfering with him entering these absolute coordinate ordered pairs, right? Dynamic input is another type of input, just like absolute coordinates is a type of input. So when you have one on and you're trying to do another, they interfere with each other, okay? So what you need to do is you need to turn your dynamic input off, and then you will be able to create these without a problem, okay? All right, so that's really all there is to absolute coordinates, right? So when you have your assignment, okay, you're gonna have an absolute coordinate that you need to create. Is that music? Did you guys hear? Oh.
It honestly sort of sounds like something from Star Wars.
Huh. I keep hearing something, right? Maybe it's David sings a lot in there. So if I go to my coordinates assignment, I'm going to open this back up again, where it says absolute coordinate tutorial, right? When you are generating this assignment, you're going to do just what we did, right? You're going to enter the line command, you're going to start your drawing at 1, 1, and then you are going to move around this kind of H-shaped exercise, right? Using these ordered pairs to generate it, right? So that's going to be this assignment. And these ordered pairs, right, continue in the line command, enter the following coordinates to complete the drawing. After each set of coordinates, press enter, okay? Okay, so that is absolute coordinates, right? And we're just going to kind of leave it at that because I think it's pretty self-explanatory, right? These aren't hard topics. You just have to remember the difference between them. Yep.
So when trying to do the assignments, when we're trying to do the absolute coordinates, does he have like a template for absolute coordinates, or do we just?
No, it has. So absolute coordinates is a way of inputting, right? And so when you use a system where you click the line command and you type 0, 0, 1, 4, that syntax of when you're inputting, that designates absolute coordinates, okay? And that's different than what we're going to talk about next, which is relative input, right? Let me leave this up here. But absolute, let me just write this down. Absolute, you input things like 1, 0, and that defines to AutoCAD an absolute input. Okay, you don't have to set any settings to say I'm doing this absolute input. The syntax of that tells it that. Now the next input is going to be relative. Okay, the difference between absolute and relative is that absolute is measured from the origin. It's from point 0, 0. Okay, relative is measured from point to point to point to point. Okay, so that means that this point right here is in an absolute input, it's 8, 4, right? And this one would be 16, 4. In a relative input, this one would be, in the x direction from this one would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then, yeah, 0, because we're not moving up and down in the y direction. Yep. Okay, so absolute is measured from the origin, relative is measured from point to point to point to point. Okay?
So if you're doing relative, then you say I want it to be 4 points further from my last point
Right.
in the y direction and 5 points further. So that's why when I went to relative, it was.
Nope, I was going to say, so how do you designate those being different, right? You enter a symbol in front of a relative input. You put the at symbol. It's at 4, 0, okay? So let's look at, there's an exercise in that coordinates folder, right? And it's called relative. Click, click. I don't get confused, but I'm not as, you have to count between these, right? We don't like to count. Well, actually, I guess this one is given to us, but this actually is maybe a combination of absolute and relative, because I'm going to start at 1, 1, which is measured off the origin. So I'm going to initiate my line command, right? Click. And I'm going to type 0, 0, or no, sorry. 1, 1, enter. So I started in the right place. But now, instead of being at 4, 1, right, I want to use a relative input, which means that I have to figure out how far from this point this second point is. So in the x direction we have 1, 2, 3, and in the y direction we have 1. So this is going to be at 3, 1. Did I do an at? Oh, I did a at 3, 1. Oh, what did I do wrong? 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's 0. 3, 0. At 3, 0. I wasn't thinking. There we go. Okay. Now this point, the next point, right, is going to be in the x direction. We're not moving any in the x direction, so it's 0, 1. At 0, 1. And if you forget that at symbol, it won't work. And the reason it won't work is because when you don't enter the at symbol, AutoCAD automatically thinks you're doing an absolute input, so it starts measuring off the origin, right? So you'll have some weirdness happen. Okay, so 0, 1, enter. Now this one is not moving in the y direction, right? So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. At 0, 4. And I did it wrong again. X 4, 0. I mixed them up again. There we go. Okay. Now, if I were to just type in the absolute coordinate on accident, like, you know, of something like this one right here, right, is over 8 and up 4. If I were to type 8, 4 on accident, well, it ended up in the same spot. This my mistakes are not working in the other direction around. Anyway, you guys get the idea. Let's do 10, 4. right? So 10 comma 4 is over here. So if I just input 10 comma 4, AutoCAD automatically knows that I'm doing an absolute input. And if I type at it knows I'm doing a relative coordinate, right? So there's no like press a button to change systems. It's just input this certain way and it recognizes that.
I did find that if you click on that dynamic input thing, then it's always going to be relative
To the last
you don't
point.
put the at sign.
Yeah, it's because it incorporates it into the dynamic input.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
like at or anything.
Yep. Okay, so we have our relative coordinates, we have our absolute coordinates. Okay, is everybody okay on these two different type of systems? Just takes. Are you shaking your head now? Or, Oh, you have your dynamic input on, that's why. So turn your dynamic input off. Yep, click on that. Now you have to turn it off down there. See how it's blue? The little plus sign. There, it's not turned off. Okay. And now you can leave that other one in. But that reminds me though, what happens if you make a mistake? Right? What happens if, you accidentally generate a line that you didn't want, right? How do you get rid of it? And then how do you start at that same point you ended on and get going with your assignment, right? Well, if I, yep.
So my first original point, I have 1, comma 1, and then it says next point, and then I put
At
4, comma 1. It goes up 1. Is that because I'm relative to the line now?
Well, if you did 4, comma 1, let's see.
Like you're gonna follow this diagram here.
Oh, but you're just typing that in. You need to measure 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
comma 0. Yeah, this is just ordering where these actually are.
Would this be 0 then instead of 1? Because when I hit 1, it snaps up.
Yeah, so X is going to be moving in this direction. Y is going to be moving in this direction. Okay. It's confusing. I mean, it's not hard, right? You just have to kind of think about, you saw me very easily mix up X and Y, and right? So what happens if you accidentally create a line that you don't want, right? So, or I've stopped my line work and I think, oh great, how do I get exactly back on this point, right? Well, if I want to get back to a point where I was at, I could type L for line, and then using an absolute input, I could type 8, comma 2. 8, comma 2, enter. And that gets me back on track, right? And then I could continue on, okay? Let's say that I put in an incorrect input, like at 7, comma 4, enter, and I shoot way off into space, and I think, oh great, how am I going to get back on track, right? Well, I could hit escape, and I could select that line and hit delete. That's one way. Another way that I could kind of get rid of this line, but allow myself to stay in the same command, is I could hit undo. So I could type U, enter, and that allows me to continue on with what I was doing, right? And re-input that ordered pair. Okay. So if I do something wrong, oh great, I did something wrong. You'll notice I did the undo because within the command it says specify next point or undo. U, enter, right? It's probably, I mean, obviously you guys haven't done AutoCAD before, but it's a little bit counterintuitive because you're typing in the middle of a command, right? You're typing in ordered pairs. It seems a little bit counterintuitive, especially if you've used Revit where you kind of point and shoot. You know what I mean? There's none of this in Revit. Okay, so here I can type at, and my X direction, I'm not moving in the X direction, so this will be 0, comma, 1, 2, 2, right? And I get to the next point, okay? So we have absolute coordinates, we have relative coordinates, and really they're going to be, well, let's just get to the next two, I guess. Let's talk about relative, absolute. Let's talk about direct coordinate systems next. Click, click. Okay. And then we'll talk about polar coordinate systems, all right? I would say by far and away, even though you don't necessarily define this as how you're doing it, this is going to be the number one method of command entry that you use, okay? It's called direct entry. And this is like Revit, where I initiate a command that I want to create, like a line, click. I click on my initial point, wherever that may be. I move in the direction I want to go, and I click again. That's direct entry. Click, click, click. Okay? So my lines are not straight, and I'm just somewhat showing you what to do, right? But this is the direct entry method. I can select those. I can hit delete. All right? Let's talk now about, now that you know what direct entry method is, which is the easiest way of doing this in AutoCAD, the easiest way of drawing in AutoCAD, let's talk about how we create dimensional direct entry, right? And how we can somewhat get to these points without using an entry system, a coordinate system. Coordinate entry, sorry. Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna take you back.
Okay. Yep. Uh-huh.
This is back to you. So, what you're looking at, if you're working with the Y coordinates in this case,
Right.
how do you measure? How do you compute?
So here, if I look here, that's at 1, right? And I just count 1, 2, 3. Now, if I didn't have this here to let you see it, right, you would have to look at the grid and be able to count the grid to see.
So, like, in this case, from here to here is what we call it.
It's going to go from 8. So if you're using the at symbol, the relative, it's going to be from 8 back over to 1. So there's 7 units in between there. Now, here's the tricky part with that one. Let me go back to this one. Okay. I'm gonna go back to relative coordinates. Okay, let me redo this one again. All right. Let's start over. Seems like you guys do understand the idea of the absolute, right? Let's do this one in its entirety from beginning to end. Okay, relative coordinates. I'm going to initiate my line command, click. I want to start my first point at 1, 1, which is an absolute input. So I'm just going to type 1, 1, enter. That initiates my first point of my line, okay? I want to get to this next point, and I want to use this entry method, the relative coordinates, okay? Relative coordinates means I go from point 1 to point 2, and the coordinate entry is the space between these, right? Whether it's an X or a Y direction. So in this case, and let's just make this actually a little bit more visual for you. Right, that's the X. And we have our Y here. Okay. So let me do that one more time. L for line, enter. And I'm going to do 1, 1. Here I am. Now I need to go over 1, 2, 3 in the X direction. So my relative input is going to be at 3, because 3 is the X coordinate, right? And Y, I'm not moving in the Y direction, so it's going to be 0. Right? So over 1, 2, 3, up 0. So at 3, 0. Enter. If you forget the at symbol or the comma, it's not going to work, right? Okay. Next point. I want to go from, this point up 1, so I'm going to go in the Y direction 1 increment, but I'm not moving in the X direction back and forth. So this one will be at, the X is 0, the Y is 1. That make sense?
So you're not moving the X direction, you're moving the Y direction. So the X stays 0, right?
For this specific point. Yep. Yeah. So I'm not moving this way, I'm just moving directly up. So I'm only moving in the Y direction. In this case over here, right, I'm going to my next point, I'm not moving in the Y direction. It's not going up or down, right? It's only going in the X direction. Okay? So I'm going to go, and because my syntax is X, Y, right, this one is going to be at, in the X direction 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. And it's, again, it's easy to make a mistake. If I had made a mistake, before we go on to the next one, I could type U, enter, and it undoes that last one, and I can continue on, right? So I could type in now at, In the x direction, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, comma, 0. This one, I'm just moving in the y direction, right? So x is going to be at 0, comma, 1, 2. Okay. Now I'm moving only in the x direction again, but what direction am I moving in this case? Negative, right. So this one's going to be at, the x direction is going to be negative 7, right, comma 0, xy. Okay, now I'm going back to 1, comma 1, which would be the absolute input, or I could do at, I'm moving 0 in the x direction, negative 1, 2, 3. Oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, I forgot my comma. So at 0, comma, negative 3. And it finishes up. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Does that make sense? You got it. There you go. Don't worry, you won't use this a ton. Now, I'm looking at this thinking that, you know, this is one way of going about it, right? But wouldn't it be a lot easier? Let me just show you something, which is going to be the direct entry method we talk about next. Wouldn't it be just much more easy if I could just go click, click? Oh, wait, where's my line? I mean, I don't have to think, I don't have to count. Wouldn't that be way easier, right? We'll talk about that method next, okay? All right, so absolute coordinates are measured from the origin. Relative coordinates are measured from one another with using the @ symbol to designate that, okay? Direct coordinate system, it's a point and shoot method. You click to define the first point, you move the cursor in the direction you want to go, and you either click or define a dimension to get your second point, all right? So with direct entry, I'm going to initiate the line command, right? Yep, click. I click to initiate the first point. I move in the direction I want to go and I click again. That's direct entry, okay? Now I want to put some dimension to it. I don't want to just draw lines that I don't know how their length, right? So I want to enter things like, you know, 1 or 4 or 10 or 20 and have it be accurate, right? That's what AutoCAD is all about, creating accurate drawings, okay? Before I do that, I just want to bring your attention down here to our Object Snap toolbar. There are a couple of drawing aids that we're going to integrate into this system of direct entry, all right? And the reason we're going to integrate them is because when I have a direct entry line command, whatever orientation this line is oriented when I enter a dimension, it assumes that direction, right? So if my line is perfectly straight, like this, and I click, or I enter a dimension, 4, enter, I get a straight line, right? If my line is slightly askew and I type in 8, enter, it creates that line slightly askew, okay? So it's going to be important with a direct entry method to either allow your lines to be straight or allow them not to be straight, okay? So down here on this Object Snap toolbar, you're going to see this little icon. It looks like a little, you know, right angle, a 90-degree angle. It's called ortho mode. And we talked about this a little bit last week, right? But ortho mode, when ortho mode is turned on, and that means that I click on it and it turns blue. Did you see my line snap? I'm going to click on it again, and this is while I'm in a command. You see what happens when I turn it on and off? Okay, so when it's blue, it's on. When it's gray, it's off. When it's blue and it's on, I can only draw straight 90-degree angles. All right. When it's turned off, my lines, even if they look straight, like I clicked and that looked very straight, let me show you what straight actually means. Do you see how that looked straight, but in actuality it's not? There's quite a big difference between those two lines, right? So I guess maybe my point is don't guess as to whether or not a line is straight. Make sure it's straight. You'll get docked points if your lines aren't straight and they're supposed to be, right? And I can tell a straight line from, or a crooked line from a mile away, so. Okay, so we're going to start integrating in our first object snap. into this direct entry method, okay? So we're going to turn ortho on and off as we draw, all right? Now, one thing that you may notice, as I hover over ortho, it's blue, it's turned on. I click, it's gray, it's turned off. Let's see, let's get that little menu pops up. Do you see that F8 is next to ortho mode? For almost all of these, there is a keyboard shortcut for them. So if I press F8, watch this little guy, F8, it turns off. F8, it turns on. F8, it turns off. And you can just see the little blue icon turning back and forth, right? Okay. So if I want to turn on ortho as I'm drafting, I initiate the line command, click. I click to start my first point. Oh, I want to use ortho, so I press F8, and it immediately turns on, right? Or I press F8 again, and it turns off. F8 on, F8 off. All right. It doesn't break the command. So get used to turning ortho on and off using F8. This is a big pet peeve of mine with laptops, right? And I made the mistake when I bought my laptop. I didn't have these F keys separate from my keypad, right? So every time I want to use ortho, which you turn on and off probably 30 times a minute, you have to use the function key, or you drag your mouse all the way down here to the very bottom of the screen, click on ortho, right? So when you're buying a laptop or using a keyboard, you know, it's nice to have the F keys kind of on their own. But F8 will allow you to turn this on and off. Okay. So let's start using a direct entry method. Okay, I'm going to initiate my line command. Click. Now I want to start at point 1, 1, so I'm just going to type 1, 1, right, which is an absolute coordinate. So I'm using all of these systems at once. Enter. Started there. Now using the direct entry, I want to move my mouse in this direction, and I want to come over here to this point, right, which is, you know, I'm not going to say an ordered pair because we're going to use a different entry method, but I want it to come over to this point, and I want it to be straight. I want the line to be straight, so I'm going to press F8, which is turning ortho on. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to enter the number of units between these two. I don't have to use an @ symbol. I don't have to use an ordered pair. I'm just inputting how far apart those objects are, right? And in, what's that?
That's cool.
It's easy, right? By 5, you're like, oh, it's amazing.
What happened?
So it's 3 units away. So I'm going to type 3, enter. I'm going to move my cursor up. 1, enter. I know, right? There you go. You just rocked your AutoCAD worlds, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, enter. And it doesn't really matter if I move my cursor past. When I type in 2, enter, it still goes 2 units. It doesn't matter if my cursor's all the way back here, right? The second that I type in 7, enter, it goes to the next input. It is the best method, right? Now, the one thing you may have noticed on that last input is that I didn't have to type in negative, right? And it's because I define negative by moving my cursor in that direction, okay? Now here, same thing, I don't have to type negative because I'm defining my movement negative with my cursor, and that's 1, 2, 3, 3, enter, okay? This is by far the #1 way that you're going to input lines in AutoCAD. So when you go to draw a floor plan, you're going to use direct entry. You're going to click your start point, move in the direction you want to go, and start typing in feet and inches. Okay? Escape, escape. All right. Okay, I'm just going to delete these. We'll do this. Well, I hope this is probably the easiest way. Does everybody kind of understand this method? Okay. Something to remember, right? Our ortho. You can turn your ortho on and off down here at the on the object snap toolbar. Click, click, or F8. F8 on, off, right? You guys get the idea. Okay. All right. So we've done really well so far defining straight lines, right? How do we now define lines that have a diagonal associated with them? Okay. And the answer is using polar coordinates, okay? There's another class exercise, the polar coordinates here. Click, click. All right, I'm going to open that up, and here we are. All right. I'm always always somewhat hesitant, honestly, to teach the polar coordinates here. And the reason I'm always hesitant is because I feel like this specific exercise is very much made a little bit it's out of date because we have our object tracking here that we can use, or our polar tracking. But I do, again, this is kind of one of those things where I think it's nice for you to know the system behind it, right? Even if we use polar tracking, which is much easier, still kind of nice to know how to input these when you're in AutoCAD, right? How many of you are civil engineers? Okay, so you guys will probably use a version of this a lot more than the architecture students when you're drawing site plans. Exciting, right? So you will use this a little bit more so, but the architecture students, likely you're just going to be using your polar tracking to draw things like this, okay? All right, so let's talk about polar coordinate systems, right? Polar coordinate systems, or a polar input, will allow you to draw an angled line, all right? And when you're drawing angled lines, one thing I want you to remember, this is a bit tricky, okay? Back to our geometry, right? We have 0 degrees, we have 90 degrees, we have 180, we have 270, and we have, this is 0, right, but it's also 360, okay? So I want you to remember this system, and I want you to remember that, like, you know, for example, this is a 45-degree angle, right? But if somebody were to define for you in AutoCAD this as a 45-degree angle, would it actually be a 45-degree angle? No, right? It would be 360 minus 45, which is 315, is that right? Okay, so that's actually 315 degrees, right? So that's kind of one tricky thing about this that you have to somewhat remember, is that, like, for example, this angle right here, right? You see that? That looks like a 45-degree angle, right? But in actuality, what is it? Right. I let you guys figure it out because I don't remember. Right? So you just have to kind of think about it maybe, right? So it's not that it's tricky, you just have to think about it. And you have to recognize when you have an angle like that. Okay? All right. So polar coordinate system has a unique input system. And it is, let me just, I don't know why it's not on the screen anywhere. Let me
That last line, it's dependent on what point it comes from, whether it's a 45-degree angle versus
this last line right here.
yeah.
Well, so here's the thing. You could do it, there's two ways you could do it, right? It does depend from what direction it comes from, because in this instance, right, so if I have this right here, it could be, in this direction, it could be the 225, right? But in this direction, it could be the negative angle of that, whatever that ends up being. Is that what you're asking?
Whether it's coming from the bottom left or the top right.
So the point that line goes to, if it's coming up towards that point,
Does it matter if you're going left or right?
Yeah, well, yes, because you have, yes, it does. You have a positive and a negative direction on your angles. Is that what, I'm not sure what you're asking.
So like there's 2 points on here. One is up higher and to the right, and one is lower and to the left.
Oh, yes.
So am I
okay.
going from the higher point to the lower one, or the lower one to the higher one?
Well, it just depends on how you're drawing, which direction you're drawing it from.
Okay, so that
Right?
would depend on.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So you're saying, like, hey, if I start here and I draw all the way around, I'm going from here downward, right? But if I start from here, I'm going this way upward. So it's really dependent on how you get to that point, which direction you're going to take it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now the other thing you're going to remember is that we have what's called the right-hand rule here in AutoCAD, and angles that move in the counterclockwise direction are considered positive, and angles that move in the counterclockwise direction are considered negative. Okay, so that's just one thing you need to recognize. let me put in here the syntax for this. It is this polar input. Let me just say this polar coordinate system. It is a combination of, at times, the relative input and a polar input. So you're using two systems when you input an angle. So you're giving it a dimension, but you're also giving it an angle, and that dimension can be from the last point that you just defined, and so it's considered a relative input. Let me just show you. I'll show you what that means on the screen. Okay, so the way that we're going to type these into AutoCAD, we're going to type in at, and we're going to give a dimension like 3, at an angle of 225 or whatever it ends up being. So that's going to be our syntax. Okay, so here we are going from this beginning point over 3 units, and our angle is, in this case, we're not going to draw this one at an angle, right? So this one can be a direct input. So I'm going to direct input from here over to here. And now when I input this is going to be a polar input. And this syntax is going to be at 1.41 at an angle of 45. Okay, so this is going to just be a regular line. This is going to use a polar input. This is going to be a regular line, regular line, regular line, polar input, regular line. Okay, so let's start this out. So I'm going to initiate my line command. Click. I'm going to type 1, 1 to start us out here, right? And I need to get to the second point, which is not, there's no angle to it. This is a direct input. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to turn my ortho on, which is F8. 3, enter. Okay. Now in order to draw this angled line, okay, I'm going to use a polar input, and I want to move in the, do you notice my cursor? Do you see how I'm moving in the positive direction, right? This is the positive direction, counterclockwise. So because my angle is moving from this direction, this straight, like if this were a 0 degree, this direction, that's a positive input, right? And so I'm going to type at. The at comes in because it's a relative input, even though it's at the same time a polar input. And I'm going to type in 1.41 at an angle of 45. No, it's just drawn that way. Do you see over here this dimension has been given?
Oh,
the length of the line. Oh yeah, the length of the line. Yep. Okay, so at 1.41 at an angle of 45 degrees. Enter. Okay, if I did it wrong or didn't work out, I can right now type U, enter, and I can undo it, and I can do it again. At 1.41 at an angle of 45. Enter. Okay. Now I'm just doing a direct input here, right? And so I'm going to turn my ortho back on, F8, 1, 2, 3 units. Move in the direction I want to go, 3, enter. Now same thing here, 2, enter. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, over here, 6, enter. Okay, and now, what is this angle going to be? There you go, right, 225. Because this would be my 0, and it's going to go all the way around there, right? It's tempting to say 45, but it's going to be 225. So I'm going to type, I'm going to turn my polar off, and I'm going to type at 1.41 at an angle of 225. There you go, right? And it's even though it's below me there, if I were to look at this, I'm moving from this point, and it's going from here all the way over to this direction. So I'm still moving in a counterclockwise direction, right? Do you see that? So it's still a positive angle. I could have also done the opposing, or what is it? Is it opposing or complementary angle? Opposing? Oh, you have a question. Okay. But I could have done the other angle negative and it would have worked the same way.
Just something. If you're going in this case and you're just subtracting 360 from 90 degrees.
You are taking so if it's going from here, it's going to be going from 0 all the way up to 90 plus 90 again plus 45. Or you could have taken 360 and subtracted the 90 plus 45, which would be 130. 125?
How did you get to from that?
225. So 225. So the angle goes like that, right? So if I look at my axes like that, it would be 0. So it would be 90 plus 90 plus 45. So it would be 180. So 180 plus 45 is 225. Right? It's not that hard, really. You just, it's a little tricky. You just have to kind of think about it,
You have to visualize it in your head.
Yeah, you really do. And you'll have, let me just tell you, you will have, so relative, right? So you're going to have to move around these objects using these ordered pairs to generate them. And we have relative, but you do have an angle right here, right? So there's instructions on how to do that. Here's 105, right? This one is easy because if you think about it as an axis, there's 90, and then that's obviously 15 degrees off of 90, right? Because it's 105. But there may be some, I think there's one more in here, where sometimes it's easiest to just draw a little axes on these where there's an angle, right? Because I'll just blame this on Jeff again. I think he's actually done a really good job coming up with these exercises, because it does make you think about, kind of, hey, where is this going? How does this input work? How does the system in AutoCAD function, right? Because sometimes he'll draw something like this, or I'm making this up, but he'll say something like, oh, 225. So you input it and you say, oh, and maybe this is, 2 feet. You say 2 feet at an angle of 225, and it's wrong. And you're like, well, it says 225. Like, what's, when in actuality you have to somewhat think about it on axes, right? And you have to, oh, it's not 225. It's actually that angle in the positive direction, right? So if you're drawing something and it's not working out, think about it. If there were little axes drawn at that corner, what it would look like. Okay. Something. Yes, that sounds about right.
Measure that.
Usually, he may not give you the right answer, but he'll give you the format that will allow you to backtrack to find the right number.
Put in a negative though would work?
Yeah. You could do the positive or you could do the opposing one and it would work just fine. Yep. However your brain works, right? Okay. So that is the polar coordinate system, okay? Now we have one more system, and that's going to be the dynamic coordinate system here, okay? So the dynamic input coordinate system is really not any different than what we've sort of defined, other than you're using the cursor to input, right? So using the dynamic input system, okay, I'm just going to click on my dynamic mode here. Click. And that turns on. And I can't see that it's turned on other than when maybe like I initiate a command, right? I can see at my cursor that something is happening there, right? I don't really necessarily prefer this, so I just don't use it a lot, right? But if I, for example, wanted to, start here, I'm going to use a series of different inputs, to kind of finish this little puzzle. So this is 4, 1. So I could type in 4, comma, and do you see how when I type comma that it kind of bumps me at my cursor when dynamic is input? Hold on, I'm going to hit escape. when I type at, do you see how my cursor immediately asks for input? Okay. The difference between dynamic input and just kind of inputting at the command line is that it happens at your cursor. So L for line, enter. It happens at my cursor. I want to start here. I want to use an absolute input. I type 4, comma, and then that 4 coordinate is locked. I could type 1, enter. It does the same thing, right? But it's sort of locked into my cursor here, right? So now if I wanted to, I could come over here and I could say at 1.41, right? And now it's saying, oh, what angle? So if I just hit enter, it's going to do a 43-degree angle. But I want, you know, I typed in at an angle of, so I typed in the angle 45, enter, right? So really, there's no difference. You're still typing in the same things, but it's at your cursor, okay? Now, I'm going to delete this one and start this over again for you and show you one more thing. When I typed in my relative input, I typed at, I could do 1.41. Now instead of doing the little angle sign, I could also tab. I clicked tab. When I clicked tab, it bumped over to the next option, right? So 45. So there's a little bit more freedom to kind of move between the coordinates. So you don't have to remember to do that little caret symbol, right? Less than, whatever, not caret, I guess, less than, greater than symbol to create it. But it's really just at the cursor, right? So for dynamic input, it's an input system, right? You're going to be using absolute coordinates, you're going to be using relative coordinates and polar input, polar coordinates, but it's going to be dynamically at your cursor. It's all going to be the same thing, just at your cursor, okay? All right. Sorry guys, Naima's asking me a question here. All right. All right, any questions so far on any of this? All right. Let me just, we don't have a lot more to talk about today. I think that's probably plenty for today. But there is one more thing that I just want to make you aware of. And let me just say this. You know, I want you to understand the difference between these inputs. I want you to understand that at times you may have to use the at symbol, or you might have to use the angular symbol to achieve something, right? I don't expect you to remember it all, but I want you to know the systems are out there, so if you have to use them, you can go and find them and use them, right? But really, when you're using AutoCAD, I think however you achieve whatever you're drawing, the easiest way you can is going to be the right answer, right? So I don't really care if you want to use absolute coordinate systems for everything you draw. It should be super cumbersome, right? If you like it, great, and you work really fast that way, great. But if you want to use the direct entry method, which is what we use all the time, even better, right? But whatever feels really good to you, just feel free to use it, okay? All right, one more thing for today. I want you to notice this little object snap icon down here at the bottom of your screen in your object snap toolbar. It's a little square with a green dot in the top left-hand corner, okay? And if you use this little down arrow here, you're going to notice that you have a lot of different object snaps available to you. All right. Object snaps help you draw by being able to touch geometry at a very specific point. Okay. Meaning you can grab geometry at the exact endpoint, the exact midpoint, the exact center of a circle. Okay. And it's really helpful. It's really helpful to help you keep things very precise. Meaning, if I'm drawing lines like this, you know, and I'm just going to turn this off real quick, and I think, oh, I want to, you know, draw a square, an enclosed square. Well, I'm going to get very close. Click. Okay. I want to keep going. I'm going to draw another endpoint. Click. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. They didn't quite meet, right? Minus a point. Oh, those very clearly look like they were meeting when I was very far away, right? But when I zoom in, they're not meeting. They're crossing. It's not precise. Okay, so what object snaps allow you to do is to meet these objects at these exact points and to keep them very precise, right? So if I have these object snaps turned on, you know, on meaning this is blue. If I choose this little down arrow, these ones with the little check marks are turned on, so endpoint, midpoint, center, node, quadrant, intersection, etc. Okay, now it's blue, it's turned on. When I am going to draw something, I initiate the line command, I click, I move into model space, Okay, if I hover over the endpoint, do you see that little square pop up? When that little square pops up, did you see the word endpoint popped up for a second? Did you see it for like a millisecond? Endpoint. Click. So that means that I got that at the exact endpoint. Those two 0 width lines are touching at the endpoint. Okay, that makes it very precise. Now, if I want to draw a line directly from the midpoint here, I would initiate my line command. And let me just say this. These object snaps, unless you turn them on, they're running all the time. They're called a running snap, meaning they're always on unless you turn them off. So that means that any line that I hover over, there's my nearest snap, so I can click and it will touch the nearest point on that line. There's my endpoint. There's my midpoint, right? There's my endpoint again, okay? So I can click, there's my midpoint. I can move over here. Oh, there's my perpendicular. So if I click now, that line is exactly perpendicular to the one I just drew from the midpoint, okay? So these object snaps are going to help you draw to specific points on lines, right? There's my endpoint, click. There's my other endpoint, click. Oh, there's my midpoint, click. I don't like that dynamic input, so I'm going to come down here and click my dynamic mode off. There's nearest, click. There's endpoint, click. There's midpoint somewhere. Ooh, maybe it's all the way down here somewhere. Ooh, I'm not able to hit. There it is. Click, click, right? You guys get the idea. So as you're drawing, or as I was drawing, even within these systems where I was using an input or a coordinate system input, right? When I was drawing, you probably noticed that like that little green arrow popped up. Well, this little object is called a node, and the node is a circle, essentially. So my node snap, or my node snap initiated, which means that if I click, I capture that exact point, right? Zoom out. I'm allowing you guys to cheat here, right? I zoom up in here. Oh, click, right? And I hit that node. Oh, click, okay? Now, one thing that's nice about this is that if these 2 points are directly in line, they're exactly straight from one another. This line, if you use the snaps to generate it, will be exactly straight, right? If one is offset from the other and they're not, in line, then the line will be crooked, right? But these drawing aids, right, they help you to get to certain points, which help you to draw straighter lines and more precise lines, okay? So you want to start using them when you're drawing. And if you see them pop up, know that something is happening, okay? You can turn it on and off here. You can turn it on and off in the middle of a command, and it doesn't break the command, okay? The keyboard shortcut for these is F3, right? So F3 turns your object snaps on and off. F8 turns your ortho on and off. Little hint, F7 turns your grid off. So if it burns your eyes like it does mine. F7, right? So start using these as you're drawing. It'll help you be faster and it'll help you be more precise, okay? For your assignment, I think you have 5, which is half of what Jeff used to make everybody do. He used to have you do 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? So you have these 5 drawing assignments that you need to do, and they're due in a week. The way that you're going to start these assignments, let me just show you how I would get started on them. I'm going to close out these drawings. Okay, because I feel like, at least I do very clearly still remember being a student. And I remember that kind of the hardest thing for me was just starting an assignment. It wasn't that it was very difficult to do, right? But I would sit down and I would think, okay, time to do homework. How do I, and sit there for 20 minutes trying to check my email because I can't figure out how to get started, right? So I think the easiest way for these to get started, you open up AutoCAD, okay? On this start drawing, click. That starts your drawing. It's going to open up a blank drawing, okay? And the way that I would go about doing this is I would download this file, right? So you have the PDF of it. I would have it on your second, if you have a second screen, right? If not, you could print it or somehow look at it, right? But I would have this AutoCAD on one screen, have this drawing somewhere where you can see it, and immediately just start drawing, right? all the information to draw these is here. You look at this, 1, 1, 3, 1, 3, 3, right? And I come in here, L for line, or I click on the line command. All right, 1, 1. There it is, right? And so I would just move from there and start drawing, okay? Once you're done drawing, look how fast I am, right? There we go. There we go. Once I'm done drawing, right, even nice and precise, -1 point for crooked line, right? I would, well, you'd likely want to do this first so that you don't lose any work, but file, save, okay? And I would create a folder on my laptop somewhere, wherever you're working, and I would call it AutoCAD Assignments, right? And I would just make a folder. My stuff is in AutoCAD Spring. I'd make a folder that was called, you know, AutoCAD Homework, right? And I'd probably make another folder, since I know there's 5 of these and they all have to be done in different files. I would call this coordinates, right? And then that tutorial that you're going to be working on is called Absolute Coordinates Tutorial, Relatives Coordinates Tutorial 1, Relative Coordinates Tutorial 2, right? And I would give it those exact names, Absolute Coordinates Tutorial. I'm happy I remembered the name of that for 4 seconds, right? Save, okay? And when I'm done with this one, I would close it out and save it, and I would start another second brand new one and just do the second exercise, save it and close it. Open up a third one, right? When you're all done, you'll have 5 AutoCAD files, right? You're gonna post all of those AutoCAD files to Canvas. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exercises, 5 separate files, and you're gonna post all 5 of those CAD files to Canvas for credit. Make sense? Okay. All right. That's all for today. Next time, so 1 second, let's see what we're doing Monday. Next week, the schedule. So next week we will get going on drawing commands. So we're going to talk about lines, circles, polygons, rectangles. My nemesis in AutoCAD is the arc. You guys will learn that about me. But we will learn some drawing commands, right? So how do we start drawing, you know, architectural things, essentially, okay? I also want you probably have all noticed already, maybe you haven't, but there's a quiz posted, okay? It is on the syllabus. You can use the syllabus to answer it. You can get to it from the home page, but you do have 9 questions, okay? So home page, and you go, don't forget to take the weekly quiz, click, and there's your quiz, okay? 9 points, 9 questions. You can use your notes to answer it. I believe it's due Friday. Yeah, the 19th. So you have a couple days to get it done. I'll post this lecture. I'm going to get it going right after class here, so I'm going to stop recording right now. But I will post this lecture as well for you too.